Star Trek tour right there. See it?
We're here at the Star Trek tour in Ticonderoga, New York.
Yeah.
My sixth or seventh time, Caleb's second time.
Second.
Two for Thursday.
Yeah.
But here it is. Let's check it out. Look at this. Can you see it from here? Can you see what I see from here, Caleb?
House of Pizza.
You know?
Oh, that's next door.
Star Trek 3. The best Star
one.
Trek movie.
Search for a spot. Search for a better movie, I dare you.
So we are going to check out the tour today. Mike and Denise Akuta are giving a tour, and we're going to check that out. We obviously can't film inside, so we're going to take as many pictures as we can, and hopefully we give you something good to watch. Stay tuned.
Stick around.
Hey, this is Will from the future. I'm going to go over the pictures that Caleb and I took and do some background talking here, so stay tuned. And hope you enjoy them. I didn't take a ton of pictures because I've been here multiple times. We also have a video on the channel of us being there a number of years ago. And not a ton has changed, especially on the interior part of the set. So with that being said, let's get into the pictures. So here we see one of these display cases that they have up against the walls of the main area. So the main area after you walk into the entrance area, which at this time was a sign-in area for Shatner Weekend and the Akutas and Robin Curtis and Barbara Luna, things like that. That's usually just a in-between kind of a thing. I think it's more for, winter time so that you have a gap in between the cold and the hot. I think that's really what it's more for, but they use it as spillover for sign-ins. So when we get into the interior here, it's mainly a cash register desk, then kind of a museum display of multiple things from mostly TOS. There are some TNG things in here, but not as much. And so I took this picture because there were many things that Caleb has made on his channel, like the Trident scanner. You can see down there the jumpers, I think they're called that, in the middle there. Other things that he just generally likes from TOS. So took a picture of that. That's a lot of the engineering tools which he enjoys. The next picture here is items from the cage, the laser weapon, the eye protective, and the communicator. I took a picture of this because the laser weapon is used in our RPG on the channel, and the clear communicator is fascinating. Caleb and I have talked about many a times. The Drake communicator is kind of like a mixture of this and the Enterprise one. So that's that. This was another display case that had TNG stuff, which I enjoyed seeing the panel and the phaser, which it says it's used from the show. It's a phaser used on the show, and it gives images of Arsenal of Freedom and I think Datalore. So maybe perhaps that exact phaser. Not sure, but at least screen used. So enjoy that, of course. Then this picture, really no shock. We see immediately, I don't know what people want to call it. Star Trek Online calls it bluegill. I think they just call it a parasite or something in the show. Caleb's been calling it skitterbug. So it's the parasitic creature from Conspiracy. So obviously I take a picture of that, and then the pipe used in season 1 and I think subsequent episodes as well. So that was pretty cool. Obviously Mother Doodads and the backgrounds of all of these pictures so far, but that was the main reason why I took these. Then this picture, Caleb saw this TOS display up against the wall in the back wall, and it was a TOS playset that I assume they released in the late 60s, early 70s, and there was the Mugatu in some sort of attire for some reason, so I had to take a picture of that for him. Then this is the rear wall, so that Mugatu thing is behind me, and I'm facing out towards the doors that you would enter in, which is that small opening over there where it says exit. So that's what this whole area looks like. So you come in from those far doors. The cash register table is up there at the front. The display cases that showed the TOS engineering things are to the left here against this wall, and then down below is a display case that has like TNG stuff, and then on the other wall there, underneath Uhura from that episode, there's some more like copies to maybe get people to sign things that show up frequently, and some other like doodads, like merchandise stuff. Obviously, the most thing that's screaming your attention here is this wooden display of the 1701 Enterprise. I believe it came from a museum from somewhere, and I forget where they said it was, where it was from. Like they were moving it or getting rid of it or storing it or something of that nature, and the owner of this location bought it and secured it and put it here. So it's very heavy. It's pretty massively big. I want to say it might be one of the ones that was used in filming. I don't 100% know that for sure, but at its size, it seems possible. And then they also said to get, obviously, to get this in, they had to cut the actual physical building open. So pretty crazy, pretty awesome. It's really great when you first walk in. Obviously, there's little merch things around the bottom of it as well. So on the other side, like on the other side of the deflector dish here, you can kind of see some wood framing. That's where the entrance to the tour is. And so when we lined up in our group, there is from left to right Mike Akuda, Denise Akuda, and then the owner and builder of this tour, James Cawley. If you're wondering why he also sort of looks like Elvis, that's because he also is an Elvis impersonator. So those are the three people. That's how close we were able to get to the Akudas. There were multiple times throughout the tour that they were amazingly close, and I did not expect that. I thought there would be like a security perimeter or a security guard like making sure that nobody got close to them, or that one of the Ticonderoga employees were going to keep people away from them, or just keep people out of arm's distance. And at no point did that ever happen. Obviously, everybody is very well behaved and don't do anything inappropriate, but you just, I don't know, it's they're famous Hollywood people, so I was surprised that they didn't really have some sort of personnel with them like that. So we go through these doors, it immediately goes into like a small hallway, and then to the left there's an opening door, and that's the transporter room, and that's where we are. And in this room they have the transporter console, obviously the transporter pad, and the Akutas described how it was made and things of that nature. Now, the unfortunate thing, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think Caleb necessarily subscribes to this way of thinking, but it's just how I personally felt. When we went on to the tour, I thought that a tour employee who works there was going to give the tour like normal, and people, we'd be a group of people and they would tell us stuff. And then the Akutas would be given time in that room to expand upon things or have tidbits or have antidotes or things of that nature. And that's what the tour was going to be. And you would get some pretty excellent bits of information. Well, there was a person from the tour with us, but I don't think they spoke at all, and Mike and Denise did the tour, which was great. I do not besmirch that, but unfortunately, like they're not as familiar with the TOS stuff because they didn't work on the 60s set, neither one of them. I believe Mike didn't come in until like the early to mid 80s, and I don't think Denise came in until like late 80s, early 90s. So they had to rely on everything that they've either researched themselves or spoke to Matt Jeffries about, which is great. It's insightful. They had firsthand experience, but I don't know. It was a lot different than what I thought, and a lot of it was just them repeating what I've heard on other tours, and it wasn't so much their personal experiences. There were some things when we get into it later in the tour that they personally spoke on, but it wasn't as frequent and as rich as one would assume. But doesn't matter. Still was awesome to be in a room with these two creators. I'm not all knocking the tour, not in the slightest, just wasn't what I expected. So they talked about that. They described what happens and how they made the transporter pad and why they made it a transporter pad over shuttles due to budget constraints. It was easier to transport people than film, an interior of a shuttle, an exterior of a shuttle, the interior, landing, all that sequence. You can just go step up into here, do a small special effect, and now you're on a new set, and off you go. Caleb took a nice closer up picture of them chatting about it. That lady is just somebody on the tour. And then Caleb and I took a fun side picture on the tour here. We could have gotten up and taken pictures on the pad, and it wasn't like him and I discussed, like, should we or should we not. We just didn't because it always feels like when you have a bigger group than like 8 or 9, it feels kind of rushed. So Caleb and I didn't want to take up any more of their time or of anybody else's. So we just took a fun little picture and moved on. Here's a transporter pad at the back. It's all lit up. I asked the tour guide employee who was off camera here if she had the capability or the permission to do the lights and sound effects, and she said she did not unless the Akutas requested it, and they did not. So just got this shot. Every time I come to the tour, I always take a picture of the hallway like this. It is a beautiful phenomenon of how they built it, of the curve. If you bring it down just a little bit more, you would always think you're on the Enterprise. The illusion of it being curved with the doors and the lights and everything of that nature, it's perfect. And it's something that immediately, like, the transporter room is cool and it's fun. It feels like stuff you've already seen, like if you've gone on like to Disney World or anything of that nature. It just feels like something recreated, and you're like, oh, this is fun and that's neat. And also, they crowd so many people into those rooms, so it never really feels empty and scenic when you first get in there, because there's just always a ton of people in there. But when they first come up the hallway and they cut to the left to go into the med bay, which is what we're going to talk about next, you can look down the hallway and there's nobody there. Like, that we don't go that direction at first. So you always get this clean, crisp, great shot, and I always take it because it's just very cool and is one of the few times you feel like you're actually on the original Enterprise. So here we are in the med bay. We're in the back part. Denise is talking about the display up top. She's describing what they did. It was like a film reel where they glued pieces on it and then just rotated things so that if the patient was dying or the patient was in good health, they could move the arrows on the track. They could move it onto the display. Here at the tour and later in subsequent remasterings, it's just a digital thing, so that's not really happening. So that's what they were discussing there. It was fun. Then we go back out. This is a close-up of the medical display. It's used in subsequent things. Get to see all that good stuff. Then we go into McCoy's office, and at this point, Denise is talking about the data chips and how Roddenberry was so ahead of his time. Even, Matt Jeffries, all those guys were way ahead of their time to have, this square little piece of technology that would be, lots and lots of data that they could just poke into a slot and get any type of information that they wanted, books, schematics, anything of that nature. And in the 60s, you're talking 20 plus, 20 years later, like, floppy disks were a thing. You could maybe argue USB sticks nowadays, but still, it's like that type of technology just wasn't readily available or even discussed really in the mid to late 60s. So she was fast. She always enjoys that. And she was discussing to the group how much she enjoyed it and how impressive it was. And obviously, McCoy's variety of things in the background are always an enjoyment. Then we went over into the science lab, which is on the other side of the wall. And Mike here was describing the various things in this room that were used and reused in episodes. And sometimes they were, used for this thing in this episode, and then they were used as another thing in a different episode. So I think, like, the main thing in the back, like, you have the one where it's like the torture device in the prison episode where Kirk is attacked, and then it's in the med lab in another episode in the background. He also was talking about, and they almost always bring it up on the tour, are the spray bottles. And they always make a point to notate that, like, in our day and age, that's just a boring piece of nothing. But in the mid 60s, that was like cutting edge technology with the plastic bottle with the spray top those didn't exist. And Matt Jeffries had gone to a World's Fair in the 60s and saw a company or a gentleman like promoting these things. And he personally thought that they were like kind of cutting edge, rightfully so. And so he told Roddenberry that, like, hey, these things are cool, blah blah blah. I think they're going, like, I think this is something that would be in the future, and Roddenberry agreed to it. So that's why they're on the back. They're in the background, and that's why they're on the ship, is because Matt Jeffries felt they were futuristic. Then we go across the hall into the conference room or courtroom, chapel. It's a room. It's like an auxiliary room that they've used multiple times on the show. I think like the cage and one of the trials of Kirk or Spock is probably most notable for this room. They have a lot of different recreational things from the show in the middle. They have the tri monitor in the center. They have the Vulcan harp down on the table. In the back of it has multiple signatures from multiple different actors and people from Star Trek. But Mike Akuda was discussing not only the flags that are in the room to the left behind the people here on the left, but he really was talking about the framework of the room where those two people against the wall are over where Denise is, the curvature of it, and that was a purposeful, thoughtful thing to do because they wanted the ship to feel round and curved and like this was the edge of the saucer. I didn't get to ask him if that's what they were trying to do with 10 Forward as well. Like, did he or the set producers, incorporate this idea from the original series to give that saucer curved effect in the room? I assume so, but I didn't get to ask him. Then we go up the hall and we go into Kirk's room, which again is used as Spock's room and multiple other characters' rooms, but it's dressed up as Kirk's room for the tour. So in here she's talking about these things. This is the first time I got to see it. I couldn't get a picture of it. I was like pressed way back into the bedroom part of Kirk's quarters. I tried to get a good picture, but it didn't come out good. But in the back, it was the first time I'd ever seen it. They turned on a smoke machine in the back where like smoke came out, and that's like from the episode where the creature comes out of the vents, and they put their hands over it to block it. So they did that. It was fun. Denise and Mike were talking about again the curve and that white break between the light purple and the gray. That curve again is to keep that feeling of the ship being round, the curvature of the saucer. Then she went over to the other side of the room and picked up a gold chest, which is in I forget what episode, but it's in the episode in the background when Kirk's sitting at his desk. That is actually that chest while she has in her hand. That's actually from the original series. That's a physical, real prop. The rest of this is just recreations or reimaginings. That is an actual prop. The story is Shatner gave it to the president of his fan club in like the 60s, I think. And the lady had it for a long time. And then I think she passed away or something happened and it was put up onto the internet for sale. And the owner of this place found it because he's constantly looking online for things and put it on the set. And then when William Shatner came, he was like, "Oh, wow, that's funny. I have this funny story." And he told everybody that story but they didn't know that. They just found it. James just found it on the internet and bought it and was like, "Cool, an original piece." And then when Shatner showed up subsequently sometime later, he told the story about the fan club president thing. So it became extra special at that point. So Denise is showing that off. She also showed the safe, which I've never seen before. Couldn't get that. That was buried. I couldn't even get a picture of that. I didn't even try because all I would have gotten was like people's shoulders and like the top of her head. So, but that because it's like down there on the separator there. And then she went over to the other thing during the Mirror Universe episode. You can press the panel, the thing slides up, and I believe it's called the Tantalus field is shown. So she showed that can actually happen in the room. And then she went over and pressed the button, and it made the sound effect, and everybody liked that and cheered, and it was very nice. Then we went out down the hallway, went down to the Jeffries tube, which I think at the time it's just called Maintenance Tunnel. I don't think they name it Jeffries Tube until TNG, I think. Maybe one of the movies. But Mike was describing that they wanted it to look like, the guts of the ship. And it's like, well, what do you put in there? And apparently Matt Jeffries found like filming equipment underneath like a sound stage or something of that nature from like older times. So I don't know if that's like the 30s or the 40s, but he found it. And it was all these like bits and bobs and things that he didn't know what they were. You know, that bag, that box disappeared and he cut them in half and then like adhered them to the Jeffries tube. So Matt Jeffries didn't even know what they were, so nobody else knows what they are. They just copied them by sight. So that's what they are. That's what Mike was telling us here. There's a close up of it. So no idea what they are. Who knows? Could be for cameras, could be for lighting, no idea, but that's what they were. Then we went down just a little bit further down the hallway to a more newer set that's been included in probably the last handful of years, maybe 4 years. The auxiliary part of the Enterprise. And so you'll see this guy who's in the green tunic. He was on the tour. Caleb and I thought he was just a fan because there were a couple of people dressed up on the group and they were just normal people of the public. But this gentleman here, who's next to the Akutas, he works for the Roddenberry Archive, which is a company that goes through and is like trying to preserve everything that was, I think, like Gene Roddenberry and like the production staff like put in. They're trying to keep it preserved so that even if things deteriorate, you have like a digital representation of them. I think that's the point of it. Obviously, you can go to their website and check out like what's the full mission. But he was describing that his job is to like 3D scan and recreate things for a digital display so you could have like a virtual tour of the Enterprise as it actually looked, basically making the Enterprise real in a virtual landscape, but to make it true to the television show and not just like fan assumptions. So he literally made a point where him and his team like would watch multiple episodes and watch the lighting patterns of this like device in the background for every episode that it was ever shown in. And it's like, okay, these were the lighting patterns. And so that's the lighting patterns of that thing for the virtual capture. So obviously an impressive and almost an insane level of dedication. So that's what he was. So he works with them, and so that he was a part of their team. But we didn't learn that until this room because he just was like quiet the whole time, just walking around. So that was really fun. And then the really funny thing was while he was talking, James kind of like gave me like a little. The owner came up. I was like by the door here. He came up and kind of gave me like a little like oh excuse me kind of gesture on my arm, and I backed up and this older gentleman walked in, and it was David Gerrold, who was a writer for the original series. He most notably wrote The Trouble with Tribbles. I believe he also wrote a couple things in the first season of Next Generation. So he just happened to just pop in. He wasn't even on the tour. He like came in. And what I gathered from what he said, it was a little hard to hear him, that he lives subsequently close to the tour place, so he stops in frequently. And I believe he said that he gives a tour once a month. So knowing that, I likely will try to go back and get a tour with him since he physically, like he's way more familiar with things. And so I'd like to hear his insight. So then after we left this auxiliary room, we went down the hallway. They opened the doors. They made door jokes, the Akutas. When you get to the thing, they go door, and then you pull the pulley and the doors open. There was a gentleman, I believe, who did hands-on building, walking around with us. So he did the doors, which was really funny. He was nice. Gotta take a picture of engineering. They obviously taper it off so that it looks bigger than it is. Always looks better like when you take a picture of it, it always looks better than seeing it in person because your eyes are like, oh, this is not several feet long. It's like it's 6 feet deep, kind of a thing. So I always take a picture of that because it's amazing and it's awesome. And then once they were talking about multiple things, the Akutas came over and they were talking about a lot of things. But here she's gesturing to go up the hallway to the turbo lift to go to the main bridge. But the gentleman from Roddenberry Archive talked a lot in this room. That's where I learned about the colors, them like looking at episodes and trying to follow the lighting patterns. And they talked about a lot of the Kudas talked about a lot of the things in the middle with the Horda eggs being on like inner part, and they changed a lot of different things, for set designs. But again, it wasn't a lot of like Mike and Denise Akuda hand on things. It was just things they had repeat I've heard from the tour. And so we went down the hallway, went into the turbo lift, couldn't get a great picture of that just because it was crowded. Got onto the main bridge. This is a big shot of of most of our group. And they started to describe a lot of the bridge and everything of that nature. Obviously, this is like everything that everybody loves because the bridge is very iconic. And the Akutas talked about why they did what they did, like why they designed it the way that they did, and that Matt Jeffries, wanted everything to make sense. And he also wanted the displays in the back to not just be lights and like nonsense. He wanted them to look like real things so that when Scotty or Spock or Uhura or anybody else are up against the main wall, it's more than just like they look at a screen and they're like, Captain, blah, blah, blah. It's like you as the audience can see what they're seeing, and so you believe what the character is saying. So that's always fun. It's a great room to enter. It's a close up of them talking and listening to fans ask questions. This is where they kind of allowed people to talk to them and ask them more frequently questions. They gave time for people to go up into the captain's chair and take pictures. And then I got a nice picture of Caleb looking into the scanner. Got to get that. Looks really good with the blue light shining on your face. I enjoyed that. And then the tour guide got a picture of me in the chair and also got a picture of Caleb in the chair. And then that was it. And then we walked out. So here's the last little bit that's like sad and unfortunate. And I know Caleb and I address it here in a little bit in our outro, but I'm just going to expand upon it. When we were on the bridge, we had ample opportunity to talk to the Akutas and like ask them anything, talk to like interact with them. Caleb and I had like a little business card made up that I could have handed them to be on the podcast. And I don't want to say we chickened out, but we definitely were just too awkward and unable to, for whatever reason, to approach Denise mainly because she was just kind of standing around. Mike was like signing something, and we just didn't approach them. And I regret it. I believe Caleb regrets it too. And if I ever get the chance to go on a tour with them again, I definitely will bother them in a good way, and so on and so forth. But the two things, like I said in the beginning, I didn't know we were going to get that opportunity at the end that was going to be so perfect. So it was kind of like being put on the spot. It just wasn't something I anticipated. So when that social awkwardness hit, we had to deal with it on the spot and didn't succeed. And I think that if we knew at the end, come the bridge, we would have had the drive up, the time in the gift shop area, and the whole tour to like psych ourselves up to do it. And two, which is what this picture is going to be, we learned at the end of the tour that James Cawley and his team have yet to be able to purchase another building to home a TNG filming set. So they have these two things in the entryway that we talked about, which is kind of like just their spillover area. Unfortunately, until they find a place, which they said they haven't given up, but it's been an incredible uphill battle. This is all they have, and I think I showed in the other video like the back wall of the TNG bridge that doesn't exist anymore, according to one of the employees there. James sold it because it was not accurate, and whoever he gave it to clearly didn't care. So James said that, when we go to do this properly, like when we go to, make a TNG set, we're going to do it right. So he gave away all of the back bridge wall there with all the panels where Geordi and Data sit a lot on the show. So that also, like, I didn't want to bug them with TNG stuff because I was thinking, you give honor to TOS. They're doing a TOS tour. Don't constantly talk about next gen. Like, it's kind of like a rain on the parade. We had a lot of older people on there. They're like, this is obviously their childhood. This is the bread and butter of what they enjoy. I didn't want to be like the kid from the 80s and the 90s who's like, yeah, but what about next gen? So I didn't want to, like I said, rain on anybody's parade and not talk about TOS. Because obviously, without TOS, there is no TNG. It was a great tour. I'm not knocking anything about it. It just was like when we got to that bridge and it was the end, and the Akutas were like, yeah, ask us anything. We're a family. Like, just come up and talk to us. Like, from that moment to when Caleb and I left, it just was like this pit in at least my stomach where it's like, man, we didn't get to talk to him. I wish we got to talk to him. We learned that the TNG set wasn't being made, or they at least haven't found a place to house their construction of it. And that, of course, the city, for whatever reason, didn't help them get the building that they were looking at. And the other building is like an abandoned Lowe's, which is like a 2-minute drive from their location. And of course, whoever owns it or whatever, they want astronomical amounts of money for it. So, that's always good. Definitely don't want to lower the price so that they can build in it and have more revenue come to Ticonderoga. Because as much as it's a great, far up north location, and it's got Fort Ticonderoga and it's close to the Canadian border and Vermont and things like that, like Burlington and the Ben and Jerry's place, I understand because I've grown up and live in a small area that doesn't have a lot to do, but Ticonderoga is even less than that. It's a very, very small town. And if you were driving through it, and you blinked twice, that's it. You're done. You've gone. You've drove through Ticonderoga. So it's a little astounding that people don't want to work with James Cawley to bring people in. I mean, he brings in thousands of people like every few months for Shatner. And people stay at the hotel, they eat at local things, they walk around, they check out shops. The number of times my wife and I have been there, they've changed stores, they put new stores in there because people come, It's like, so I don't know. I don't know what the big issue is. Obviously, we don't live up there, so it's like I don't know what the big problem is, but it doesn't make any sense. And Caleb and I both agreed that we wish that they did more. So before we get to the outro, just want to say that my wife and I plan on going back up there in August for Trek Ticonderoga. They're going to have some guests from Deep Space Nine and some other things. We're going to try to get as much footage and things of that nature. So hopefully that'll be on the horizon. I probably won't put that out on the channel until like mid to late August after Trek Ticonderoga. So, but if you have the capability of going up there and seeing any tour, whether it's hosted by Star Trek alum or not, if it's just somebody from the tour itself, an employee, I highly recommend it. If you like TOS, please go to this place. Make arrangements. Go to this place. You will love it. If you like how they filmed things back, 50 years ago, please make an appointment. Go, travel, see it. If you like Star Trek just in general, please go and see it. It's kind of like Disneyland for Star Trek people. I'm telling you, it's in a weird small town. It doesn't feel like it should be there, but it's well worth admission. And the people there who work there are super great. They're super accommodating. They're very kind. They love the chat. And they're used to dealing with like some really hardcore nerds. So you can ask them a lot of goofy stuff and they're happy to answer. So thanks for watching this. I'm going to send it over to our past selves. And until next time. So Caleb and I just finished the tour of the Akutas.
Yes.
That was really fun. They kind of gave us a normal tour of everything and gave us some behind the scenes, some extra little tidbits from them on the show. But it was generally a little more traditional. It was a little more traditional than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
I think with them not working directly on the original series and more everything after the original series, they're only limited to what people tell them and what they've researched on their own. They don't have hands-on experiences, but they spoke to Matt Jeffries, who was one of the original art directors, so they had a lot of information on that.
They've rebuilt the Enterprise set a few times.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
I know about one.
Caleb and I had plenty of opportunities to bother them. We didn't.
No.
And we look forward to getting up the courage to bother them next year.
Yeah, next year we'll bother them.
Totally.
Yeah. It was. What was funny was like when we checked in, everybody was like, "Oh, that's all you're doing? Is that?" And I was like, "Why? What is like Kirk coming?" Like this weekend, like everybody's here. Everybody in front of us that checked in, they're like, "All right, so you're getting a picture with the Batmobile. You're gonna see Kirk tomorrow. You're seeing Kirk's lecture.
Yeah.
You're gonna get a signed photo with him and the
Yeah.
Batmobile.
Yeah.
And we're here to see the Yakutas. Because, like, they built the show. So, that's what we're doing.
Yep.
Yeah. Because they're better. The Yakutas are better than Shatner. I don't care what Shatner. No, it would be really cool to see Shatner, but this was cool.
It was cool. So, we'll hope you enjoyed our brief little presentation of that.
Yeah.
And maybe someday we'll get them on the podcast.
Enjoy our pictures.
Enjoy the pictures.
This is a phaser from this episode.
So, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye from Ticonderoga.